IGEPHA im Gespräch. Der Podcast der Austrian Self Care Association.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of IGEPHA im Gespräch, the podcast of the Austrian Self Care Association. My name is Christina Nageler and I'm the Managing Director of IGEPHA. In this current podcast season, we are focusing on the enormous potential of artificial intelligence for self-care. I have had the privilege of discussing this topic with top experts from various perspectives. Today, I am very pleased to welcome a leading AI specialist from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, to the IGEPHA podcast studio. Eric Sutherland is a Senior Health Economist at the OECD and author of an OECD report titled AI in Health, Huge Potential, Huge Risks. Welcome, Eric Sutherland. Thanks for being our guest today on our podcast.
Thank you, Christina, for having me here. I'm truly honored and hope that my little insights will be somewhat helpful.
They sure will be. Before we dive into the fascinating challenges surrounding artificial intelligence in the healthcare system, let me briefly introduce Eric Sutherland. Eric is a senior health economist leading the OECD's work in digital health. He brings together policy guidance for digital tools, integrated data, and responsible analytics, including artificial intelligence. In his role, he is responsible for measuring and evolving the OECD's recommendation on health data governance and supporting digital health policy that provides data protection and timely access to quality data to optimize the use of data for information, insights, and impact among individuals, health workers, policymakers, researchers, and innovators. Before joining the OECD, Eric led the Secretariat for a Pan-Canadian health data strategy, bringing together experts and governmental leaders from across Canada to establish an integrated health data ecosystem that better uses data for health systems, public health, population health, research, and care. Eric authored the Pan-Canadian Health Data and Information Governance Framework and Toolkit and has taught courses in data science, health data governance, and privacy. Let's start with our first question. What prompted you to write your report on the opportunities and risks of AI in the healthcare sector?
Thank you. The report that we wrote back in January, I think was really important and very timely because toward the end of last year, there were many different organizations that were publishing various forms of principles around what good AI looks like. And what I found were that organizations were publishing reports to drive action. Because my concern is that with AI being developed as it is, hospitals, large health organizations are creating AIs all over the place. And because those AIs are being created locally, that the value of AI is only received by people who have access to those systems. And so there's a risk if we continue our path of AI of massive amounts of fragmentation that actually mean that the AI systems themselves are actually suboptimal because they aren't trained on broader sets of population and are also massively inequitable because they're not available to massive parts of the population, in particular across Europe and across the world. And so I thought that it was really important to have a conversation talking about what the opportunities of AI were, talking about how this is something that has the ability to have a massive transformation in health overall. And if we get stuck in trying to mitigate the risks of AI, that we're going to end up with a massive fragmentation of solutions, which actually will end up causing more harm in the long run. So ultimately, I wrote the report because I wanted to turn the principle-based conversations and the tone that I was hearing around AI based in fear. I wanted to help guide that fear toward curiosity and ultimately to hope. And if I am really hopeful, to impatience for action, because we have to take action collectively in AI if we want to be moving things forward in health.
That's definitely true. Do you also see any specific potentials in the AI technology for our sector, for improving the self-care sector?
Short answer, yes, with a giant exclamation point. My belief is that the transformative power of AI, if we do it appropriately, will enable 8 billion people, as in the population of the planet, to have access to their own health data, to be empowered to achieve their own personal health outcomes that are powered, where the insights and actions are powered by AI, which are AIs which are clinically validated and approved. And still, people's health journeys are guided by health professionals, so they're not out of the loop. They're still in the loop. But nevertheless, it's really about empowering 8 billion people with their data through the power of AI in order to engage in how to be healthy, to maintain their health, and ultimately to do the actions they can have to prevent future illness so that people who are healthy can stay healthy. People who require care can get healthier faster. Because really, AI is an accelerator for moving the health system, if I can, from the sick care-based system to a true health-based system.
So it took lots and lots of years to really get to a healthcare system rather than a sick care system. So we are hoping. But you already talked about a little bit about the risks associated with using AI tools. What risk do you see in connection with self-care activities?
First and foremost, the risk is, what if the AI is wrong? What if it makes a mistake? That is one of the reasons why it is essential in this work that the AI solutions do have a level of clinical validation where it is actually health related directly, and providers are still available in the loop about what's actually happening, that they can actually provide good guidance and care for individuals, especially in cases where it is the AI solutions are not as confident in their solutions. The nature of AI in and of itself is it is math, not magic. And by it being math, it means that what the solutions and the suggestions that it's making are based on probabilities. And so how can, if an AI solution creates a recommendation that is clinically validated with, say, 99.9% accuracy, that is pretty good. Still means it's wrong 1 out of 1,000 times. But it's probably pretty good for somebody to actually act on and be transparent about their acting on it and have the guidance and guardrails around it that if something does go wrong, they are able to act quickly. But if the AI solution, by contrast, says, here's what you should do, and I've got 50% accuracy, then that's something that the patient should be a bit more, the person should be more cognizant or aware, not sure if this is the right thing to do or not. And this is where having a form of health literacy, but also, if I can dare say, scientific literacy of the public about, what do these numbers mean? And what does it mean that people, should I trust and take action here? Then that is one of the things I really think that we need to do. So the risks, if I can put it, so it's if the AI solution is wrong, but a secondary risk is if the person interpreting the AI solution doesn't interpret it correctly or appropriately, that they may have greater belief and not have the right safeguards for themselves in place if the AI happens to be wrong in and of itself. So this is, again, why I think certification of AI is important, but also trying to improve the numeracy or the scientific literacy of the public is going to be really important as well. If I can suggest one thing as a result of all of that, is that initial applications of AI should probably start with lower risk use cases, things that if it goes wrong, it's not a big deal. For example, and this isn't even clinical, even using AI systems to help with health providers doing their note taking to actually commit records, et cetera. It's a low risk activity that has high value at the back end because it helps the providers engage directly with the patient more effectively and gives them more time to care. So that's one of the areas I would certainly hope, while it's not directly related to self-care, but it's something that helps improve the system. And so the question there would be, what are some AI solutions which have a relatively low risk for the individual? Things like booking appointments, appointment management, for example. Those are relatively low risk cases that actually could be really beneficial for people at the end of the day.
Have you, in your studies or in your work, checked how accurate the answers of the AI are already? Have you any experience with that?
So anecdotally, so I haven't actually looked at the analysis myself. Simply put, I know the easiest examples are the first versions of the new generative AI solutions that came out December 22 would barely pass a medical exam, whereas the latest versions that are coming out more recently would actually pass pretty well. So is clearly getting better and better and better. And if we take any of the lessons from the past we have around digital tools and technologies, we know that they improve at an exponential rate. And so given the improvements that we've observed in the last 12 months, there's no reason to believe that these solutions are not going to be significantly better within the next 2 to 5 years. And so the question I would ask is, knowing that the solutions are going to be as accurate and as effective as we anticipate them being in a few years, what can we do today to make it easier to take advantage of those advancements that we know are going to be coming in the future?
At the beginning, you talked about the many people that are not able to use AI yet because they don't have access to all these tools. Do you think there's a big bias in the answers of AI?
Yeah, so bias, I think, is tricky, and that sounds very minor. So let me dig into it a little bit. One of the major concerns I have about bias is that it ends up being a reason we say, the AI solutions may be biased, and so we are not going to use them. And so it becomes a blocker for we're not going to use any AI solutions that may have bias in it. And so the reality is every AI solution that is trained on less than 100% of the population is going to be biased in some way. And I would say, generally speaking, no AI is ever going to be trained on 100% of the population. Is likely to be very, very impractical. And so based on that, there is always going to be some form of bias. So the question is, do we understand the biases? Do we understand the implications of those biases? And are we able to take the right actions based on what we actually observe? So bias itself is not a bad thing. It just is. It's just, this is how good the AI system is. The question then will become how do we manage our bias? And that's where the accuracy likelihood of the AI algorithm being applicable to me will go down if I am not part of the representative population. And so that's one of the opportunities of the AI solution is to actually do a match between understanding its cohort of people it was trained on and my personal sociodemographics. And if that's not a good match, then the AI solution should actually give a warning to that effect. So here's my recommendation based on my population. But by the way, you're not a good match for my population.
Yeah, okay.
And then the person has a decision to make. The classic case was using AI solutions to look at skin lesions, and then skin lesions on people with fair skin were far better than people with dark skin. Not surprising because it was only trained on people with light skin. And so from that perspective, that's clearly a case where using the AI system to train people, given that it's skin tone related, is probably a bad match. Whereas other things that are more related to internal organs probably matters less. But so that's where having that decision and having those considerations and making those considerations transparent and upfront in the application of the AI algorithms will be absolutely essential in order to earn and foster trust with the people who are using it, being both the public and providers.
Thanks for that. And what do you think should national governments or even the European Union or other big states urgently do now to maximize the potential of AI for the healthcare system while minimizing risks at the same time?
So from a national government's perspective, I hope that they will develop an impatience toward action in a way that protects the people that are potentially impacted. That sounded far too fluffy. Let me dig into it a bit better. So one thing I wanted to say is we should first recognize that with AI, there is a competitive space for the creation of AI solutions. That's where the innovators will play. They will do all sorts of stuff. There is a competitive space for the consumption of AI systems and algorithms by consumers like you and me. And whoever markets their solutions the best to the consumers, they will actually get more market share. But importantly, the distribution between the creation and the consumption, the distribution needs to be not competitive. This is the space where regulation exists. What are the safety checks that we need to have on the AI systems to actually pass before something can actually be distributed to the consumer to actually use it in of itself? Is where medicines, off-the-shelf products, et cetera, they all go through some form of regulatory check. You don't need a prescription for it, but you do need to have a validation to be put onto the shelf. Same way medical devices go through some form of health technology assessment process before it's made available to the public. So that's what we actually need in this space, is defining what that distribution space is and defining it in a way, if I can put it this way, as non-competitive, which is to say, these are the rules of the road that everyone will follow. And we all agree we're all going to follow these rules of the road because it is a matter of patient safety. This is why we have to do it. And part of safety is also respecting the consumers to say, what are your requirements in order for you to trust the systems that come off of this? And embedding those requirements as part of my regulatory set of checks. And communicating those regulations very clearly and succinctly to the innovation community so they can innovate in a way such that their innovations can be easily distributed. So that way it's actually fair to both the consumers and the generators of various solutions in a way that is actually effective and allows things to actually scale effectively.
Do you really think we will be able to get a worldwide sort of document treating AI in the same way? Because we all know the internet has no borders, AI has no borders. So will the rules be the same all over the world?
No.
No.
Simply like the rules will not be the same all over the world, but I do have a form of hope. It's interesting you mentioned that. So the analogy I use in the first place is I want to take more lessons from the regulation of electricity than I want to take from the regulation of the internet. Because in electricity, there's generation, and generation is changing all the time. There's consumption, and consumption changes all the time. But the distribution is pretty consistent. It's not the same across every country in the world. We have different outlets in the wall. But fundamentally, how things work and flow and the safety protocols and the tools and methods that are used to distribute it are consistently managed. And there happens to be a group like the IEEE that actually helps do that guidance in of itself. Whereas the internet didn't have that middle layer to actually further regulation. Safety was not number one priority in the distribution of the internet. And bluntly, I would dare say that we have discovered some mistakes with that along the way. So I find it ironic they use the internet as an example. I do not think the internet is the exemplar that we should be using to actually guide our regulation or just guide the application of the distribution of AI. I do think that the AI solutions need to behave. We need to regulate it closer to electricity than we are to the internet, because we need, especially in AI and health, we need to recognize that mistakes that are made in this space can have, I'll just say, dire circumstances. Safety is something that is more important. And so we want to make sure that safety is prioritized in that distribution in of itself. So I think that's one of the major things that we have to do. And do I think that we can come to some sort of international arrangement around that? I think that we will be able to come to some form of international arrangement around that. Do I think that that international arrangement will involve literally every country in every corner of the world? Potentially not. But do I believe that it will be able to cover many of the countries, and sitting at the OECD, many of the OECD countries? Yes. And do I think that there are many other countries that will be interested in that as well? I think that the importance of AI is a worldwide concern. And so I think that it is something that we need to focus on. How do we actually do so in a way that is equitable for all? It will not be perfect. And I think one of the things that we also need to do, which is ironic given what I just said about safety, I think that we cannot let perfect be the enemy of the good, which is to say, what we have to do is to start doing things, prove that works, identify what doesn't work and correct those things, and then move forward together. There is no sense in every country learning what doesn't work independent of each other. We need to be moving towards exponential gains in growth in this space. And this is where I think from an AI perspective, we are missing out if we continue to do the linear thinking that we've actually been adopting for the last 10 years. We need to be shifting to more exponential thinking, which is to say, how do we actually enable AI to grow in and across networks rather than across individual institutions?
That's true. Do you have a recommendation for the self-care industry when it comes to the use of AI tools?
Well, the first thing I would call out is, which is related to what I said a few seconds ago, the public, who are the ultimate consumers of these tools, should be or will provide, this is what I require to see in order for me to make good use of new AI tools that come out. So from that perspective, are there opportunities to start engaging in conversations with the public about what some of those requirements are? So that way you can understand the requirements. This is what the expectations are going to be around distribution, and then communicate those upfront to the innovators and say, the public expect this, so do this. And that way, when it's actually shared, they will actually be able to consume it. And I don't want to forget in all of the spaces, we can't forget about the health providers, the doctors and nurses and other health providers and health professionals, because they are still going to be part of the loop. So even when we have in the self-care industry, making sure that providers are aware of what's going on, aware of how things are progressing, so that way, if something does go wrong, they can respond effectively and in a timely basis is going to be really crucial. So again, also having conversations with providers around the similar types of topics are going to be really essential, so we understand what their requirements are, both in the context of how the AI is distributed, but also how they get notified or are in the loop when something goes wrong or when something goes right at the same time. Some of these solutions, there's opportunities to actually improve the workload and the lives, the experience for health providers. Because if there are things that AI solutions can do that can actually take some burden off of those health providers, it's all the better for them and all the better for everyone in the whole system.
That's true. One last question. What advice would you give our podcast audience to get the most out of artificial intelligence for their own personal health? Have any tips for us?
So I would just say, in the spirit of AI is math, not magic, it is something to not be afraid of. And more to the point, it is something to be curious about. Try it out. Learn from the trying. Be curious to actually expand the trying, talk about the learnings, share experiences with friends and neighbors. And while you're doing that, frankly, be skeptical. It is math, not magic, which means that there are times when it's like, oh, that didn't really sound right. And then do a verification. So ultimately, try, learn, be curious, and be skeptical all at the same time.
Well, thank you, Eric, for joining us in the podcast studio and for sharing these insightful perspectives on AI with us. Thanks for being here.
My absolute pleasure, Christina. Thank you very much.
We at IGEPHA are actively engaging with this topic and providing our members with support using AI tools. Recently, we also published a practical guide that is exclusively available to our members. If you want your self-care company to benefit from the services offered by IGEPHA, feel free to write to me. You can contact me via email at office@igepha.at. And I also welcome networking on LinkedIn. Thank you for your interest today and goodbye until the next episode of IGEPHA im Gespräch.